Testing, testing, testing. Testing sound. All right. All right. Welcome everybody to CanHammer TV. Please let me know if you can't hear me. I'm trying a new setup tonight with my streaming mics so that I can move around because we're going to be transitioning to the tabletop for Tactica. So I'm just using that and no headphones or the big mic. So let me know if the audio is okay. Welcome to CanHammer TV, everybody. And it is October 15th and we are live. Tonight we'll be spending most of our time on Custodes Tactica Part 5, which will be covering the fast attack slot, bikes, and Venatari. The Palace tank will be covered with the tank section, which will be next, probably. Yeah. So we won't cover the Palace tonight. We'll talk about when we talk about tanks. And tonight, what I have been doing was taking my last stream game and using the Telestrator and going over the games as we played them out. Tonight, what we're going to try is I'm going to, when I talk about bikes and Venatari specifically, because they're very, how you need to use them is a more of a visual thing than me just talking at you. I thought I would try and do some tabletop Tactica with the models instead of just talking. And then so we'll try that, and then we can go over the Raven Guard game next time, maybe when we talk about tanks and it's not as vital to be on the tabletop. So we're going to try that tonight. Let me know how you guys like it, whether you feel it's more useful to go over the games on the Telestrator or to do both, maybe just alternate, or we can play by ear. This is for you guys, so you tell me what you guys want. So yeah, so we'll be doing that, and we'll probably spend most of the time talking about the bike unit because it is important. Okay, so before we start that, just a public service announcement. So this is kind of our live TV show, and I'm the host, and so I'm allowed to say what I want. But so I was listening today to Chapter Tactics, and it's a good podcast. You should check it out. I'm a patron, and I support what these guys do. It's especially good because there's all these Canadians on it. Scarvy's on it, and Peter, and Val, and all those guys. Anyway, so they were talking, of course, today about Iron Hands and how overpowered Iron Hands is, and how we should be, what they would like to see nerfed already, what we could do as a community to kind of to fix it, to ban it, all assuming that GW is not going to fix it. Iron Hands, I believe, has been out for 2 weeks, just over 2 weeks. It was 2 weeks on the weekend. And really, it's just had 1 weekend of tournament showing. And yes, it did really well. An Iron Hands player won like, whatever, 10, I don't have the full stats on hand, 10 out of 12 GTs. And there was like 2 or 3 in every top 5, and they rocked, and they were all different lists too, not your typical lists. Everything from flyer spam to repulsors to dreadnoughts to MSU, it was all there. Everything's good. Iron Hands is super strong. Fine. Nobody's arguing that Iron Hands is not strong. Nobody's arguing that they probably need adjustment. What is going a bit crazy right now, and tends to happen these days in the social media age, is that it's a bit crazy. People are asking online, should they ban the supplement? Should they ban Farios? Should they ban repulsors? Should they take away Chapter Tactics just for Iron Hands from Dreadnoughts? Should vehicles not get the Chapter Tactics, but all the other Marine books can keep it? Like, literally, there's still 2 more books to come out, and there's way too much gnashing of teeth right now about a book that's been out for 2 weeks. And yes, probably the best lists have not been found yet. I mean, people were trying all sorts of shit and it was all good. And definitely people have not had a chance to prepare their lists to play against them. So it's all in a flux right now. I don't see how making comp, because that's basically what people are proposing, is going to help our situation right now. We've worked so hard since 8th came out with the craziness of 7th in the back of our mind, keeping in mind in 7th with comp, like 30 pages of comp, we had Bark Star and freaking 4D Cannon Wraith Knights and like stupid shit like that, okay? So keep those, and we had Tau Riptide Wing with my Space Marines. So keep that shit in mind when you start asking for comp. We've had a good run in 8th with playing almost straight out from the book. GW has been responsive to a lot of things, not everything, but a lot of things. And so let's just give it a little bit more time. Now, people are like, how long are you going to give it to the FAQ? Blah, blah. I'm not saying give it to the FAQ. Just say give it more than 2 weeks. Like, seriously. Like, it hasn't even been a major tournament yet. Give it to at least SoCal. Like, give things a chance, you know? Like, there's been oppressive stuff in 8th. This might be the most oppressive. Who knows? Peter has a bunch of stats on it. Stats are stats, you know? Just give it a chance. We don't need to go start making comp 2 weeks after the books come out. That's all I'm going to say on the topic. We're going to talk a little bit more about it tomorrow on the podcast. Me and Chris are going to talk about it, and maybe our suggestions about how you might tone down Iron Hands a little bit. But it's all kind of irrelevant. Should just let it play for a little bit at least before people start losing their minds. Of course, that's the way these days. You know, you start losing your minds early, and you know that's what happens. But I think it's super great suggestion for people to write to GW with their feedback, their honest, constructive feedback. Don't write letters of bitch fest and stupid shit, because I would just delete that shit if I was them. Write a constructive, well-worded, punctuated, capitalized paragraph about your concerns and suggestions you might have to fix it, and that will be well received. And if they receive 50,000 emails like that, then they'll probably do something about it emergently. If they receive 50,000 bitchfest emails and stupid comments on their Facebook page, they're gonna say, fuck you guys. Ungrateful bitches, okay? So that's my 10 cents on the matter. Welcome Mike Jello Sky, Michael Jalowski, Eula Sanders, and Rob Ruley. Welcome. Thank you for joining. So I won't talk too much more about the Iron Hands thing right now, because we'll be covering that tomorrow. I don't think much else has come out. There's been some reviews of the Psychic Awakenings. It's cool. I think it's probably better than most people think, but it basically came out during the Iron Hands controversy, and so people are just like completely overlooking the book. But that's cool, and we await the next part. The other thing that came out is some reminder that Fists and Salamander's probably coming out next week, so pre-order this weekend, out for next week, so that'll be cool. And of course they're releasing the Incursors and the Impulsors. Finally, it's a bit weird that they waited to the end of the book release cycle to release it, but anyway, so those cool tanks, and this is what I've been waiting for. So I wanted to start a new Marine army. I don't want to play my old crappy Dark Angels anymore. I want to start a new Primaris Marine army, but I've been waiting for two things. Number one, all 6 books to come out, and number 2, the Impulsor. Because right from the beginning, when I saw the Impulsor, my idea was like to bring back the old whatever, Lions Blake Strike Force, whatever that Marine detachment was called. Not Lions Blake Strike Force with the Dark Angels version. Battle Company. Yeah, Battle Company, but with Primaris and Impulsors. 6 to 8 of them, maybe 5 or 6 of them. Because those things can be freaking obnoxious, I tell you. Yes. So that's going to be my list, I think, moving forward once all that shit comes out. White Scars, Impulsor Spam. Boom. Hook it up. So anyway, I've been waiting for those couple of things, so that's cool. So yeah, otherwise not too bad. Cities of Sigmar and Iron Jaws and stuff been percolating. Haven't heard too much more about that at the moment. We'll try and get some AOS on, not next week, but the week after. I'm going to see if I can put together some Sylvaneth here, although I still got mostly new in box Sylvaneth, I have to admit. Okay, so I was going to show you guys this crane that I've been making, this Technics crane, but it's upstairs. I can't be bothered to get it now. Anyway, so that's about it. What we'll do is we'll just carry on now to the Tactica, because we got a lot to talk about. So I'm going to mark the time now for beginning of Custodes Tactica Part 5. So last time we talked about elites. We went through the Terminators and compared and contrasted the various Terminators and elite slots. So today we're going to talk about the fast attack slot. And the fast attack slot is really two things. Three if you count the palace, but as I say, we're going to talk about that with the tanks. So the two things we're going to talk about tonight are the good old biker, okay, Dawn Eagle jet bikes, and the Forge World Venatari dudes, Venatari custodians, whatever, Venatari dudes. So these two are the kind of fast attack slots that we have. And before the Forge World supplement, these guys were it. And quite clearly probably the best unit in our codex, in the original codex. And so the natural inclination before the Forge World stuff was to just spam bikes. And you could do decently well against decent lists, but you would always come across triple knights would wreck you. There's lots of things out there in the old days before all the Space Marine shit that would wreck 18 bikes. Basically, you could fit 18 bikes into characters. So, you know, first thing I did was paint 18 bikes into characters. And I played that to decent success in various tournaments, including team tournaments. And it's okay, but it's freaking boring to play. But until we had the Forge World, that was it. You know, Alars weren't that great. There was Alars and Warden Bombs, you know, various foot lists out there that were okay. But probably still bike spam was a little bit stronger. But now with the Forge World, now we have options. But I still think that a bike unit has a place in a good, balanced Custodes list. So what do the bikers bring? Well, they bring all the usual Custodes stuff, but they are T6. So that's kind of important sometimes. Not always, sometimes. But they're T6. They have 4 wounds each, which is definitely nice, because then D3s need to usually take 2 to 3 to kill you. And even straight 3 takes 2 to kill you, so it helps decrease the efficiency of those kind of weapons. And then, of course, the most important thing about them is they move 14 inches. Now, unfortunately, they have nothing that advance and charge or stuff like that, but they can fall back and shoot because they're fly, obviously. The fly, they went through a short period where the fly was nerfed and we were definitely not as good, and now the fly is kind of halfway back and they're okay again. But in the original iteration where they could fly over everything in any phase was the best. So anyway, and then they bring a Hurricane Bolter, and that is the only weapon you should be using on them. The other weapon is not good. So you should only be using Hurricane Bolters, cheap, 90 points. And the Lance. So and so that's these bikers. And of course the main stratagem that you would use or threaten to use with bikers was Stooping Dive. So Stooping Dive lets you charge at the end of your opponent's charge phase with a unit of bikes into anybody. They didn't have to be near the charge. They could charge on the other side of the field. People don't realize that, but if you have a bike unit way over here and your opponent charges over here, you can charge this bike unit into something else. It allows you just to declare a normal charge at the end of the charge phase, and if you make it, you get to go first, which is key. So that's obviously very powerful. 3 CP, so it's a steep investment, but can really swing a game if used at the right time. By and large, I haven't gotten a good Stooping Dive off in a long time because most people know about it now. They either know it's going to happen and they accept it, or they charge in such a way that you risk 3 CP to not make your charge. That's kind of sucky. So there it is. But that's the power, the one stratagem really for using bikes. Of course, if you want to deep strike them, you got to spend a CP because they don't have deep strike, all that sort of stuff. We're going to talk about how to use them in a second. Now, in the fast attack slot, we have Venatari. And those bikers were 90 points with the Hurricane Bolter, which, as I've said, is probably the only way to run them. So now the Venatari are these flyboys. So they have fly because they have jump packs basically. They are infantry, which is a big deal because bikes cannot go into buildings. So in ITC with magic boxes, a unit of 18 bikes be fucked getting into magic boxes. They can't really go up on runes and shit very easily. So there's restrictions to being fly, although there are a lot of advantages to being fly. But these guys are infantry. They can hide in ruins. They can go through walls. And so when they're charging now, they can just go through a wall, whereas the bikes have to go around, okay, because the bikes can't fly anymore over buildings in the charge phase, so they have to go around it because they can't just go through walls like infantry. So that's one advantage of the Venatari. They only move 12 inches instead of 14. That's still pretty good. They of course can get covered pretty easily in buildings for a +1 save, which is a big deal because these guys only have 3 up save. So they're basically in every other way the same stats, so 2s, toughness 5, all that sort of stuff. Only 3 wounds because they're basically custodians with jump packs, but they only have a 3 up armor save instead of a 2 up, which really sucks. So the one, I don't have the guys with the shield and the pistols, but that's probably how I would run them. So if you have the Tarsus buckler and the pistol combo, which is 4 points more than the spear combo. The spear combo is basically like a normal spear, with a slightly better shooting. The buckler turns -1 AP into 0 AP, which can be good these days because a lot of even marine bolters are like automatically -1 AP. Like everything in the marine book is at least -1 AP now. So that all becomes 0 AP, which is fine, but you're still on a 3 up save. If you had a 2 up armor and you took that -1 AP, you'd be on a 3 up save. So really that buckler doesn't help you there. If you get hit with a whole crap ton of 0 AP shooting, like old school aggressors, you would still be saving those on 3 up. So you'd still be fucked. So whereas normally you'd save those on a 2 up. So the 3 up save, even with the buckler, is not as good as the 2 up save. So in that one thing, these guys weren't as good, and then they were overpriced. Now they've come down, so it's 58 points with the buckler and the shield, and 4 points cheaper for the spear. So that's, just a bit over half the price of a biker. But they will just die that much easily. T5, only 3 wounds, 3 up armor. Now, anything greater than -1 puts you to invuln, as it does for a normal biker. So that's irrelevant. It's all the small arms fire that's going to get you. Even freaking las guns can get you. All right, they're just wounding on 5s because you're only T5, not T6. And a whole bunch of las guns is going to make you take a whole bunch of 3 up saves and you're going to lose guys. Won't you be sad when you lose your 50, 60 point models to a bunch of las guns? Orcs in combat, wreck these guys on 3 up save. Orcs in combat against 2 up save, don't do shit. Alright, I've survived hordes and hordes of orcs hitting 1 or 2 guys on 2 up save. They don't do anything. 3 up save, they die. Alright, so it's a big deal. We will talk about them a little bit tonight, but by and large, the principles that we talk about with the bikers can apply to these guys, except they have the advantage of being able to go through runes. So we won't spend too much time on the tabletop with the Venatari. Next week I will be trying the Venatari in a foot list for everybody that's been asking, so just watch out for it. Next week we got 4 games coming up and we will try some Venatari action. Just to say, like, the spear is okay. It's got the same shooting profile but doesn't give you the exploding 6, and it's obviously better in combat. But I like the pistol because it's got longer range and it can shoot in combat because it's pistol. So that gives you a little bit of flexibility. You could be deep in your enemy lines, you'd be stuck in combat, you kill a person in the shooting phase, and now you can charge. So that has some utility. So I personally, I'm not sure why I built them with the spear, I just like the look better. I would put probably the shield and the pistol on there. Okay, so how do you use bikers? Like the name would suggest, as fast attack. Now, as you get better at playing the army, you will use them less aggressively than when you first start playing the army. So in the old days, 18 bikes on the line, turn 1, boom. Survive, maybe, boom. Generally the game is pretty in your hands at that point. But I would put to you that a unit of bikes, a single unit of bikes, like in my list, a unit of 5 bikes, is a very tactical and surgical instrument. Now, so the question you asked was, well, how many bikers should I take? I put to you that the minimum is 5. And that's probably the best size unit too. You could go up to 9, I think it is. But then you're going to cry when you lose someone to morale, or you have to spend 2 CP to save them. And 9 bikes is cumbersome, and you definitely can't hide it, and it's cumbersome to move around. So I think 5 is the optimal number. 4 and 3, too easy to kill, especially these days. And you lose effectiveness once you get below 4 bikes, especially in combat. So I think 5 is the optimum number that I have found. So a unit of 5 bikes puts out, in rapid fire range, 60 bolter shots. That's going to kill lots of chaff. That is one big reason to still have a unit of bikes in your army, to kill chaff. 120 cultists, plague bearers even go down to it, guardsmen, your 90 guardsman bodies are scared shitless of these guys, right? Especially since they're T3. Oh, just most do that shit. Basically with a captain nearby, auto hitting, and then wounding on 3s, rerolling, like it's great. So keep the bolters, and very useful. And anything other than T8, you can even ping off wounds on 5s to wounds. So so definitely good. Try not to shoot at 2+ save. Just like us taking no AP fire on 2+ save, not that useful, waste of time. Don't even waste the time rolling the dice, it's just time you could use for something else. So, but useful, great for killing chaff. These guys obviously can fly out of combat and still shoot, so they can be very good at sniping characters like that. People don't see that for whatever reason. You're stuck over here and you fly over there and you snipe off a bunch of characters with like 60 bolter shots. So very useful for that. But basically is a surgical strike tool of 5 dudes. Okay, and 5 dudes also is a number where a decent sized rune, you can hide them, or hide them behind a wall or something. Now, by the rules, the tip of the spear counts for line of sight. Now, you can model these spears down, especially with magnets, or you can just glue them that way. There's no rule saying you can't model them down. I think it looks cool because then it's like a lance, right? But I always agree in a tournament setting with my opponent if I'm using spears as line of sight or not. And out of all the games I've played with bikers, only one person has ever wanted to use spears for line of sight. Everybody else is like, that's stupid, because they are kind of stupid. So anyway, I'm just going to put it out there for people so they're aware that that can happen. Okay, so so basically you're using these 5 guys as a surgical strike tool and as a front line. They're also pretty good at a screen because they take up a lot of space. These are big bases, 2 inches in between. They take up a lot of space, a unit of 5 guys. You can use them for screen. And of course they put out 60 shots in Overwatch, which with the stratagem to Overwatch on 5s can take down a bunch of chaff stuff charging you or blunt the attack. And then if they don't die, and they're pretty hard to kill, right? T6, 4 wounds, 2 up, 4 up, then they're going to hit back hard. Now they hit back way harder on the charge because of re-rolling wounds on the spear. So you have to be careful not to get these guys trapped in a combat where they're going to slowly get whittled down and not kill your opponent without the reroll to wounds. Hey Tom, thanks for sliding in. 3 a.m. So if case in point against Ravenguard last week, with Ravenguard, one of the games, one biker in combat with a lieutenant did not kill the lieutenant in the first round when he had re-rolling wounds, and then eventually died to the lieutenant, with the lieutenant alive. Because without the reroll wounds, it's not great, especially if you're charging T7 and T8, so these are strength 6. Do not get stuck in combat with T7, T8 without re-rolling wounds. You need to either kill the thing you're charging and get out, or get out and get somebody else in. So what I like to do is hit the T7, T8 target on the charge with the bikes, then they don't kill it, then they fly out and shoot something else, and then like a second wave goes into the T7, T8, like Terminators drop down. So that's a nice tactic, that 1-2 hit. So you drop the bikes down, the bikes go in as the first wave, they do their shit when they're re-rolling wounds, then they leave, and then the second wave comes in like Terminators or something. So that's a nice way of doing it too, because you don't want to get bogged down in T7, T8 without your re-roll wounds. With re-roll wounds, it's okay. It's not ideal, and before Forge World, it was the only thing we had to kill knights, was to put as many bikes into every knight as possible, hope for good 5s and 6s rolls, and then again hope for good D3s. So it's not ideal. Now we got other stuff for that. So get in your damage and then get out. Okay, what we're going to do now is switch over to the tabletop. Let's see if this works. All right, can people see the tabletop camera? All right, I can see it. That doesn't mean you guys can see it, so please let me know in the chat if you can see that. I'm also gonna just slide over to the tabletop here, so I'm gonna turn the chat so I can still see what's going on. Okay. So, and yes, the people who've been complaining that my terrain has been used for 3 or 4 games straight, it will be changed before next week. Don't worry. I just don't like to change it very often because personally it's a pain in the ass. Okay, so here we have on the table our 5-man bike unit. Okay, so it is often the first thing I put down just because I use it to mark territory. The other thing you need to remember when you're moving your bikes, so we'll talk about deployment first. So obviously you want to put your bikes out of harm's way, okay? Because a good amount of shooting these days can kill the bike unit pretty easily, or take it down to 1 or 2 guys left, and then it becomes pretty useless. Now, that's not to say a single biker on 1 wound left cannot do work, because they definitely can. Never give up on your bikers, even when your opponent has given up on shooting them, because there's only 1 guy left on 1 wound, he'll die to some las guns. They never do. They always do work. 1 biker left does a lot of work. Never give up on him. But generally, you don't want that to happen before you even get a chance to use them. Now, in most of the games I've played, many games I've played, the bikers will die turn 2, turn 3. That's their role in life, to go, take down a bunch of shit, score some points, and then they will eventually die. They're kind of my forward force. But that's not to say you have to play them aggressively. So in my last few games, which have been hammer and anvil or pointy hammer and anvil, I would just start them here, behind the runes, okay, right on the line, because by starting them on the line, they have the most forward aggression, right? So with 14-inch move, they can threaten almost into my opponent's deployment zone. Okay, so 14-inch move basically takes you all the way to there. And if you really want to be aggressive, you could auto-advance them, but why would you do that? The most important thing is that I have them central, so that they are threatening this area of the board. It's 14-inch plus 12 inches of charge. So these are tempting targets for your opponents to put infiltrators in, which they almost always will. And so those are easy wrap targets, okay? And what you want to do with your bikers is you don't have to go turn 1 and shoot out. That may not be the best thing to do. You have to decide that based on the mission and what your opponent and what secondaries you picked. But you have the option of shooting out right at the beginning, okay? The other thing to keep in mind is you are using these guys to ultimately get into your opponent's line, not to just get stalled in the middle. You're just using stuff here as a jumping point. So if your opponent starts to put models here, or if they start to put models anywhere in this area, if they move up to the middle to aggressively take it, then that's your bike's job to go into that unit, tie it up so that the bikes can't be shot, okay, and you have to get good at wrapping, and then in their turn, kill that unit, move your 3 inches, and then the next turn, you're threatening all this, okay? So that's what you want to do with the bikes. Now, bikes are very mobile, and remember, they've got obnoxiously big bases, so that makes them really good at wrapping things, okay? And don't forget 3 inches plus 3 inches, that's 6 inches of extra movement on the end of your charge. With a 2-inch coherency is big. Now 2-inch coherency will let small bases out, so you have to remember that. But if you're trying to wrap, like say this Venatari with a 40-inch base, you can basically easily wrap this guy with 3 bikers. And they're still being coherency. They're not even touching base to base. And then you'd be good to go. Not specifically the Venatari because he can fly. But anyway, you know what I'm talking about. So keep in mind, big bases means easy to wrap stuff. Generally, but you still need 3 people. So the other thing to remember when you're moving out your bikers is if you need to, if you're not going to be able to wrap, it may be worth losing 4 attacks on one guy to keep the last guy in Vexilla range. Okay? Or rerolls. Okay? Like Captain Range or something. So you have to keep that in. Early on in my career, I always moved the bikes out of auras, okay? Either with the charge or movement with the charge or with the pile-in or the consolidate. You always have to keep in mind your 6-inch auras unless you want your bikes to die, okay? So keep that in mind. Now the other thing to keep in mind obviously is that you can attack if you're within an inch of the enemy or if you are within an inch of a model that is within an inch of an enemy. So actually, because your bikes are so large, you can cover a lot of floor space with your bikes and still get a decent number of people in combat. So keep that in mind. You don't have to go all up into your enemy like that. Okay. So let's take the Raven Guard game, for example. So the Raven Guard game was another hammer and anvil, and basically he had a whole bunch of snipers in the ruin here, and then he had a little castle here with 1 dreadnought and aggressors, and then he had his infiltrators and his whatever that suit is called, Invictor suit, here and over there. And so all I did was deploy my bikes on the line, protected from las cannon, crazy auto hitting, auto wounding las cannon fire. And they don't care about snipers. So, and it's just there as my front line. And so if the Smash Captain comes through, it might kill some bikes, but then that Smash Captain's dead. Turns out it was really hard to kill that Smash Captain, but anyway. And then if I get a chance, I'm shooting this way and wrapping up infiltrators, or if he happens to push out through the middle, which would be a mistake, I wrap those guys. So that helps me control this middle of the table. It threatens this whole middle of the table without physically having to be in the middle. So that's key. And then basically deployed them the same with the Ultramarines game, and well, the Fists was a different deployment, but for the Fists I had to use them to screen drop pods, so that was a different use for them. So they're super flexible. Generally you want to be using them in a forward motion to wrap stuff and jump into backlines. In the Ultramarine game, I went over that side, took that unit, and then instead of jumping into the castle, which would have been death, I went over to the other unit, killed the Incursus there and hide in that rune, then jumped over here and hid behind the rune, and then it wasn't until turn 4 that I hit the castle with the bikes when all my other stuff went in. So that's just like, it's being aggressive, but you don't have to be so direct with them and just sacrificing them. So back in the old days, running bike lists, you would just shoot your bikes forward, hope they survive, and try and kill as much shit as possible. And that just doesn't cut it these days. So many things can kill you in shooting phase that you cannot survive. -1 to hit is not what it used to be. 4 invuln is not great, and so much stuff can survive. Bolters are not that great against all that sort of stuff, and then you might not even kill the stuff in combat. Everything overwatches on 5s or 4s. It's really not a good meta for bikes to be super aggressive, but they can be excellent if you use them aggressively, but not too aggressively. And I generally follow these guys with a bike captain if I can, because the bike captain it synergizes well with them because it's just basically another bike, but the bike captain gives them the rerolls, and then the bike captain can shoot off by himself to do, cavalier things before he dies. The bike captain usually dies as well. So as I was mentioning, so I should have got some more models, but let's say, as often happens, like in the last game, these guys are here in combat with something, okay? They're in combat with my tape measure here. Boom. And then, so in my turn now, Terminators drop down. These guys now, instead of staying in there and not re-rolling wounds, boom, they fall out, spread themselves out strategically so they're closest to various character models and start sniping off characters with their bolters. And then my opponent has these guys and this whole bike unit to deal with, which they probably will, but if the bike unit killed most of those guys, killed some characters, and took up most of their turn 2, turn 3 shooting, they've done their job, right? They're going to die. It's a huge, expensive unit that's going to die. You just have to accept that. Just don't sell them cheap. All right, so that's one thing that for some reason people never see coming. Never see coming. God knows why. But you have your bikes in the mid-table in combat with something, and then in your turn, you jump them out and shoot stuff. It's really effective as your second wave comes in right behind them. So that's a really useful tactic. Now, I did spend a little bit of time earlier talking about small units. So I'm not saying you should start with a small unit, but you may end up by turn 3, turn 4, maybe having a couple of bikers left, or let's just do the extreme, one biker left with a couple of wounds. What can he do? He still has 12 bolter shots. That will take down a guard character, maybe. That will take down some chaff. 2 guys left hiding in this rune, holding an objective. Send the biker there. The biker can do so much work by itself, one guy. You have a few scouts here sitting on the back holding an objective. Send them in. Bolter him down. Charge him in. Now he holds that objective because he's OBSEC. Okay? Use the OBSEC. So useful. Some, like 2 aggressors, didn't want them to die sitting back here. Shoot them over here. Charge it in. Take them out. Now you hold that objective for a cheeky point, maybe even the bonus point before that bike dies. If it's important for you not to lose this unit, make him hard to kill. Hide it behind a rune. Your opponent can't see it. It's got to dedicate movement and shooting in order to kill this biker. There's so many ways that a single biker with 1 to 4 wounds can be so useful. So don't give up on him. He's one of only your 15 models that you have. Opponents will often give up on the single biker or try and get fancy. All right, they'll try and get fancy, like, oh, I'll leave him, I'll just try and smite him from halfway across the table, or oh, I'll just shoot some las guns in. Oh, that didn't work. I'll shoot more las guns. Oh, that didn't work. Now I'll shoot these bolters. Oh, that didn't work. Now I gotta shoot. So then they end up spending their whole turn trying to kill this one biker when they should have just put 1 las cannon into it and be done, right? So it really fucks with people's target priorities to have one biker, especially if they're wounded psychologically, just right in their zone. They don't know what to do with it. So that is definitely something to keep in mind. Don't give up on your single biker unit. 981, thank you very much. Yeah, we're trying something new here, just trying to show some movement tactics and things with the bikes. So now keep in mind, bikes can't charge through the runes, okay? Not anymore. In the old days, the good old days, you could, okay? But you can use that to your advantage. So let's say this Venatari is part of a unit of aggressors that's right here, okay? And he's hiding his aggressors because he doesn't want them to die. So now you move your bike up, okay? Now they're right here. So now when they charge, they don't take Overwatch. And then it's a, 4-inch charge, which is not too bad. And then you're coming around the corner, okay? So keep that in mind. The other thing you can do, use their movement. So if they make, let's say, like they make like a 7-inch charge, so they're like coming in like this, okay? Then they move 3 inches, pile in, okay? And then another 3 inches after they kill the units, consolidate, and now they're behind the rune and hidden. So use your movement and the big base sizes to your advantage. Use the terrain. All right. So I think those are the main things that I wanted to impart about how to use your surgical bike unit. Use it effectively. Aim to use it for 3 turns and then not have it. But if you still have it, even one guy with 1 to 4 wounds, use him as a little scalpel just to go around picking off little injured units or things like that. It's just perfect for that. So your bike unit can really, and as the unit that often is the only big one that starts on the table, because your Terminators are often in space, your opponent's just constantly thinking about the bike unit, psychologically like a worm in his brain. How am I going to deal with these 5 bikes? Because they've got a name for themselves, these bikes, right? Despite all the shit that's happened since Fordro and all that stuff came out, the bikers still put fear into people. How can you kill these bikes, right? How can you kill these bikes? Before the Caladius, long before the Caladius, there was bikes. So people have just been psychologically trained to fear Custodes bikers. So use that to your advantage. You don't have to sit in the middle to threaten it. You sit behind the rune and you threaten it just well enough. And in fact, it may be better than you sitting in the middle itself. So use it to your advantage. Use their OBSEC, use their speed. And don't forget, don't get trapped not re-rolling wounds. That really sucks. What are your thoughts on Sagittum Guard? We are Cloth Pot. If you look back at Tactica number 2 or 3, we talk about the troop slot and we talk all about Sagittum Guard on that one. And then tune in next week. We'll be playing some foot lists on stream, and you'll see me. I'm going to use my new Sagittum Guard, so we will be covering that. Okay, so that's basically what I want to say about bikers. I'll revisit them if I come up with something. Now I just want to talk a little bit, for completeness, about Venatari. So I think the optimal size for Venatari units is 5 to 6. They're that much cheaper. You need the number of wounds to keep them viable, and you need to be able to wrap something after taking attrition. So 5 to 6, 6 is the max, is probably mandatory. If you take a 3-man unit, literally one guy dies, they're now useless, cannot wrap anything. Even 4 is dicey, right? 5 is probably safest. You can still hide 5 pretty easily. I got 5 guys here. They've got a small footprint with 40-inch bases, and so they're not that hard to hide. And of course, as I mentioned before, they don't move 14, they only move 12, but they are infantry. So now I've got my dudes here, and when they charge, they don't have to go around. They can go right through because they're infantry. And so that's excellent, and they can still fly over other models. So use that to your advantage. Now, when we argue about if Venatari are good, people are always like, I'm always like 3-up save. And then they're always like, oh, wow, if you're in cover, you're in 2-up save. Well, yeah, that's great to say if you're in cover, you're in 2-up save. Everything is +1 save when you're in cover. That's kind of irrelevant. Your whole game plan for using these 60-point models is depending on the fact that you need them to be in cover, which they will not always be. My tables are good, but not all tables are like this. And so if you're always restricting yourself to moving in a way that you're always in cover, it may not work out for you. So if you can, sure, get them to cover, that's great. But that's not always going to be possible. So I think they're still restricted by being a little bit flimsier than your average Custodes. But I think they have a role, especially in the foot list, if you don't want to play bikes or you don't have the points. You want something that can deep strike natively and come down and maybe hit your opponent's backfield, drop down in a backfield objective or something, hit an engineer unit, try and tag some tanks in the back. I think they definitely have a role. I just don't think they're the best unit in the Forge World expansion. They're definitely not. So yeah, I didn't want to spend too much more time on the Venatari. Let's just turn this back. Okay, so that's what I wanted to show on the overhead. If people have any questions or want me to show you something, I can get more models out. If people want to see something specifically, how it could be done or that sort of thing, then let me know. You can switch back to that at any time. All right, so maybe with that in mind, we'll just throw up the Telestrator here. All right, now I just need to get rid of the sound of the Telestrator. There we go. Alright, so we'll just do maybe like the first, like the deployment part of the game. Don't want to make these episodes too long, but so basically what you're looking at here is the game I played against Matthew last week in his Raven Guard. He brought an interesting list, not optimized for sure, but Smash Captain with the crazy relic that makes him only hittable on 4s, which is crazy. Smash Captain, basically 1 quad las cannon dreadnought, a crap ton of snipers, like 3 units of scouts with snipers, 3 the obligatory marine triple eliminator units, of course, and then 3 or 4 infiltrator units, 2 invictors, and a unit of aggressors, and then like some other characters, so a librarian and you know, the lieutenant and the chapter master, usual stuff. So basically, it was again Hammer and Anvil, and it was the Crucible of Champions, which we both agreed neither of us would probably worry too much about getting the bonus. But this is a nice mission for us because we can hold, you know, the midfield and this one fairly easily. So we stand a chance of hold more in this mission generally, which is not something we can do on some missions. However, with the big fire base here, just like the Ultramarine game, and a whole crap ton of snipers, and then on top of that he has ways of dropping things anywhere, getting rerolls to charges and +2 and +3 to charges and all these shenanigans, no overwatch. So I really had a lot of things to think about in the deployment. So as we go forward here in the video, we're just thinking and thinking and thinking about all these conflicting needs to take into account when I deploy. Should I screen out, but then I'm going to get shot? Should I castle up, but then it gives them all this space to come and attack me and hold me in this zone? I need to use this rune to not eat las cannons. There's so many things to think about. So all I end up doing actually is deciding, fuck it, there's too many things to think about. I'm just going to make this castle that is flexible in terms of counterattacking, with the Terminators in the middle and the bikes to stooping dive and the tanks for -2 to charge, making sure I'm not going to eat las cannons from that crazy dread. So then I hum and ha, should I put these tanks back there? But no, I want these tanks to be part of my castle to secure the back. And then I hum and ha about the palace tanks, put them back here or put them elsewhere. So in the end, after much deliberating and weighing up good versus bad options, or no good options versus all bad options, I decide to deploy in a castle here and have a conservative force. So I thought he was going to be way more aggressive. Invictors, infiltrators, everything forward, maybe moving a Smash Captain, you know, a chaplain and a unit all in my face turn 1, which is kind of how I feel Raven Guard needs to play. Because outside of that initial drop, nothing really can move. It has 1 psychic power to move something, and that's about it. So I was expecting this aggressive play, and turns out he deployed very non-aggressively. Infiltrators here, Invictors instead of on the line here, back here just waiting to be shot because he couldn't really hide them. So that was probably a mistake. If you're not going to play them aggressively, just play them in your own zone. Because I'm just waiting for things like that in this area, as I said, with my bikes to engage and wrap on their way into the main castle. So, and then he's got a unit back there, so he picked Gangbusters Recon Big Game, so he's going to get Recon pretty easily this game, whereas I picked Recon Butchers and what's the other one? Old School. Now, I picked Old School because I wanted to do a few things. First of all, I wanted to threaten first turn. So if I got first turn, he has to redeploy, right? So I want to disincentivize him from playing aggressively to give me a point for Old School, which he did play non-aggressively. Now, whether that's because I picked Old School or not, who knows? Probably not, but so that's first thing. Second of all, his Warlord was the Smash Captain. I wanted to disincentivize him just throwing a Smash Captain in, which he ended up doing, and he gave me the Warlord point. but your smash camp is kind of, that's what it's supposed to do. So that was like a free point for me to get the warlord kill. And then I knew this army specifically, I can last to the end to get last strike and line breaker. So I thought that old school was actually a decent pick, not just because I felt like I could get the points, but also has a psychological, my opponent has to think about it if he wants to deny me scoring points, because it's going to be a low scoring game. So that's that. So the only thing that worried me was that his rune was taller by about 4 inches, and he had all these snipers. There's no way I could hide my characters. Turns out I forgot to use Moment Shackle, and I could have healed Valoris, and he would have survived 3 turns. He spent so much time shooting my characters with snipers and didn't even kill the Vexilla in the end, that one of my early priorities was to take out all these snipers with tanks, because tanks do that very nicely. And these tanks are the only way of digging out these freaking guys who are here on like 1-up save. Infiltrators and scouts on like 1-up and 2-up saves. So had to use the Custodes tanks on them with the minus and the 2 damage especially. It was very nice, 2 and 3 damage, very nice against Primaris. Otherwise, those guys are a problem. These guys I'm not worried about. They're going to be, rat bait at some point. Aggressors are here, but they just get jumped to here before the first turn. No big deal. And then the last cannon dread is, auto hitting, auto wounding. Basically, it's a real threat. Only one of them to deal with. No point shooting it because of half damage and -1 damage, all this shit. So you just have to dance around the long range firepower. So that's it. That's basically how it deployed. And I think I give him first turn, and he basically just takes some pot shots at the characters, and that's it. Doesn't accomplish anything in the first turn. So although our characters will die to snipers, they will take a few turns to put down, 2 or 3 turns to put down, because they have so many wounds. So that's a good thing about it. All right, we'll carry on this game next time. Boom, there we go. Okay. Well, that takes us to the end of Custodes Tactica Part 5. We covered the Biker units and the Venatari units, so the 2 fast attacking units. And I hope people enjoyed that little bit of tabletop demonstration. Maybe next time what I'll do is I'll set up like little game scenarios, or maybe reenact a game scenario in the past where my bikes have done their thing. With other models that I have, because I have a lot of models. Maybe we'll do that instead of just an empty tabletop and an abstract movement, because maybe that's not that much better than just talking. But I hope people enjoyed that. Please give me feedback on that, because I want to make it as good as possible. So next week we have no Tactica. We're taking a break from Tactica for a week. The week after that we'll have a Tactica Part 6, which will cover tanks. Caladius tank, Palace Grav attack. So we're going to cover the 2 tanks. And we'll touch on the grav carrier, but really not much. So we'll talk about the 2 tanks and how to use the tanks effectively. And again, we'll go to the tabletop, because you really need to see how you should be using these tanks for their most effect, not just as gunboats. So we'll talk about it in a couple weeks. Next week we have 4 games: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Monday is a hard-hitting game against the meta Iron Hands, as requested, Monday night. So join us for that. Hopefully I can survive more than a couple turns. Tuesday will be, as requested, a game against Admech. I'm not sure what Ryan's bringing, but he's got Admech, and he's going to be playing. He wants to play my tank list, my normal list, so we'll play that. Wednesday will be against Francois and the Revenge of the Ultramarines. He's bringing a hard-hitting Ultramarine list, so I'm probably going to try a foot list in that game, see how that goes, as requested by you guys. And then Thursday will be a game against Necrons, as requested. Peter's bringing his Necrons. I again will play foot list on that game. So 2 games next week with my usual list, 2 games with my new non-battalion foot list, and some hard-hitting games next week. 4 nights in a row. Don't get too tired. I'll probably be really tired, but don't get too tired. Do tune in, and of course, then we'll have lots of fodder to telestrate over going forward from there. So that's about it. If anybody has any questions, please ask. Otherwise, we'll leave it at that, and join us tomorrow night. Me and Chris will be talking about musings on the meta and Iron Hands and all this sort of stuff. Just a catch-up show on various topics. We'll give you CanHammer team update and a ETC Team Canada update and all these various things. So catch us tomorrow night at about 8:30 on the CanHammer podcast. And other than that, thank you for watching. I'll see you.